This is episode number 52 of the Inland Empire Workers' Compensation Lawyer live stream podcast. Today's discussion is about the different types of injuries that you can claim under workers' compensation. So the last episode was what are the three basic things that need to be in place for you to claim workers' comp benefits? You got to be employed. Your employer has to have insurance, and you have to have an injury at work. Well, what's an injury at work? And that's what we're discussing today. So listen to our discussion so you can identify these things and know when to assert your workers' compensation rights. George is going to start off the discussion by talking about the most common type of workplace injury, which is?
Well, there is a most common type of workplace injury, sprains and strains. Now, I suffered a lot of sprains and strains when I was younger because although I don't play very many sports now, I did play a lot of sports in my youth. So the most common was maybe twisting an ankle, maybe twisting an ankle or spraining just any type of body part, any type of ligament that you kind of pull, any type of thing that causes pain that kind of puts you out of commission for a while. That's a sprain or a strain. Now, Alex, a lot of people out there don't understand how the sprain or a strain can play into their work environment. Can you give us a little bit of insight as how a sprain or strain could happen?
Yeah, I mean, if you're bending, stooping, climbing, even lifting something that's heavy or that's not heavy, you can sprain or strain your back, your knees, your legs, your arms, your shoulders, and those can get better quickly, and some of them can go on and on and on.
Yeah.
Not get better.
Yeah, I've sprained both my ankles, and I'll be honest with you, I've had problems my whole life with them. I mean, they still hurt depending on how the day goes or even the weather. They could act up. Now, a sprain, they occur when ligaments are stretched or torn. So you got to remember that when a ligament is stretched more than it should be, or it's completely torn, that's what happens. Ankles and knees are mostly the ones that are affected by this type of injury. Now, the back happens a lot as well, but it's a lot of ankles, knees, and back that are affected by this type of injury, right?
I see it all the time, especially if you're getting older. And when you're young, you can do it too, but it happens that, if you've been doing it for a long time, you maybe have a cumulative trauma claim. That's a repetitive work activities claim that you don't even know you have, and it's worn down your shoulder. Maybe you have a partial thickness tear of your ligament in your shoulder, and then you're lifting something, and boom, it gives way, and you have that. You have that strain.
Yeah, and let me give you two examples of
sprain. You have that sprain.
Sprain, strain. Yeah. A strain is a little bit different. A strain is when tendons are stretched or torn. So ligaments and tendons, right?
Right.
Sprain, strain is very similar. It's very confusing. So you just have to remember, hey, maybe I stretched longer than I should have. Maybe I lifted something heavier than I should have. And now because of that, my muscles, tendons, ligaments are affected, and it's an injury. Now, a lot of times we see people in the construction field, or as I said, maybe in the medical field, where they lift a patient that's very heavy, and right after they lift them, they feel intense pain. I would characterize that and categorize that as a specific injury, right? Happened at a specific time on a specific day. However, that could have happened because of the repetitive work that you have done. So that might have something to play into your injury as well. So if prior to that injury, you were still feeling different types of pain in different areas of your body, let's go with the nurse example. You're a nurse and you have to bend over, push, pull, kneel, lift a lot of times. And on that particular day, you lifted a patient and you hurt your back. Well, that doesn't take away from the fact that maybe prior to that, your shoulders were hurting from lifting too many things, or just being on your feet all day long, your feet now start hurting. That could be a mixture of accumulative trauma as well as specific injury that happened on that day. Right, Alex? Does that make sense? Do you think the viewers?
I think a lot of people don't realize this, but I think that if you're hearing this now, you're probably starting to understand that you got an injury maybe from repetitive work activities, which was then exacerbated or just, the straw that broke the camel's back was that one time that you were lifting.
Right.
Now, one thing that insurance adjusters are going to do is they're going to limit down that claim to just that specific injury.
Right.
And maybe your knees are hurting. Maybe your ankles have been hurting too. It's not just your back, but you can't say that it was that one specific thing that you were doing, like George mentions, lifting a patient or lifting something on a construction project or just bending over and grabbing something could cause that thing to just, like I said, the straw that breaks the camel's back. And then you go to the industrial medical clinic and they're only going to treat that one thing. So the common type of injury is a sprain strain, but it can happen over time and people need to understand that.
Yeah. And what I tell my clients is I never, ever want them to lie or miscategorize something that happened or embellish. We're not here for that. But if you're putting in a workers' compensation claim for a specific injury that happened that's affecting you, and you also have other body parts that are affected by cumulative trauma, by repetitive work, it's better to do it all at once. You know, it's better to put both injuries in because now they'll both be getting treatment at the same time. And if you had waited on the repetitive cumulative trauma injury and you didn't want to report it prior to a specific injury, what you want to do is put both claims in together, get medical treatment for all the body parts that are affecting you because of work, and get all that done at the same time. You could always close it out in a global compromise and release, a global settlement, and it's actually going to add value to your claim because you should be compensated for these body parts that are hurting. So that's something that you could discuss with an attorney. That's something that an experienced attorney should tell you and should advise you on. So just keep that in mind. If you do speak to an attorney, hopefully they're saying, hey, I know you got hurt on this day because of this, but because of all the work you've done for this company for the last 5, 7, 10 years, and it's repetitive work, are there any other body parts that are hurting you at this time? If they don't ask you that, I don't know. I mean, it's something that I do with my clients just because I want to get them the most help possible. But I feel it's something that an attorney should do. What do you think, Alex?
Yeah, I think that if you've been doing something, your job repetitively for a long time, and you have issues, a lot of people don't realize that that's a legitimate claim, cumulative trauma, repetitive work activities, and you're just finding out about that, and you don't go and you don't assert it at that time, and you're missing work and you're off on one claim and you try to file it later. Well, maybe the adjusters, and I think most likely the adjuster is going to, try to deny that. But if you get a lawyer and you push that forward and you demand a QME, you demand treatment for it, it's going to give you a better shot at getting treatment to those body parts. Now, it may be that you don't want to rock the boat. Oh my gosh, I don't want to report more than just this injury because I don't want it to affect my employment situation. I think that's a legitimate concern. I think that every case needs to be looked at, separately. If you're close to retirement, or if you're thinking that your employer, you're not going to go back to this job because you're not going to be able to do it, then it's time to consider filing a cumulative trauma claim.
Yeah, definitely. And we are discussing the most common, right, which we said sprain, strain to possibly ankles, knees, and back. But, I do want to talk about a lot of other injuries that might happen, because what I want people to understand, Alex, is that if they're feeling something with their body that's not right, then I want them to really quickly think, could it be because of work? Because a lot of people kind of attribute just a sore back to, I'm old and it's life, right? And maybe that's the case. But what I want to tell you, and what I really want you to understand, that is not a determination for you to make. That's not a determination for I or Alex to make. That is a determination for a doctor to make.
Right.
And you have to be seen by a doctor so that they can determine whether or not your back pain, whether or not your headaches, whether or not your cough, whatever the case might be, is work-related or not. Please, if you think it might or it might not, but you're not sure, speak to us, because we will give you great advice on whether you should pursue it or not, and at least you'll get some medical treatment. If the doctor ultimately says it's not because of work, then there you have it. But at least you received the medical treatment, and you know now for a fact the doctor's telling you it's not because of work. Let me go through some different injuries that people might not think are work-related. Maybe you slipped and fell, and you rattled your head a little bit. I've spoken to doctors, Alex, that say even the smallest rattle of the head, even though we have a very strong skull that protects the brain, you could get some damage in your brain that could affect certain things. Like you might start forgetting stuff. You might start having speech problems. You might, before you could do certain things, or you had certain abilities, and now it's harder for you to do them. So we don't know whether or not your brain was affected by a slip and fall, by maybe a car accident that was work related. We don't know what these are, so we need to have a doctor check that out. We need to ask you about your symptoms. Hey, lately I've been forgetting stuff. It could be a traumatic brain injury that occurred in connection with a workers' compensation injury. That's something that could happen, right?
Yeah, I mean, anytime you're not sure about a situation, you got to get it checked out by a doctor. I mean, that's like a legitimate thing to do. And I put up some videos and people were saying, well, repetitive work activities, cumulative trauma, that's fraud. It's like, no, it's not. You're not getting enough on your claim, and it's because you're concerned that you're committing fraud, but that's not true at all.
Accumulative trauma is very real. And if accumulative trauma was fraud, then almost half of the people right now in our workers' compensation system wouldn't be able to get benefits and help. So once again, repetitive work can lead to injuries. It's for a doctor to say whether or not you are injured. We are just here to try to tell you what your benefits are, what your rights are, and what you're entitled to.
Yeah, just as it is where if you have a slip and fall, or the situation you described, George, where someone falls and they have a traumatic brain injury and they're just not quite sure. Is it fraud to allege that you have a potential brain injury? No, of course not.
No.
The doctor is going to help determine where that came from, and you need to get medical evidence to prove your injury. So if a doctor says it's related to work, and we're talking about the qualified medical evaluation here, we're going to put a link to that video right up in the corner right now, so you can watch that video and learn about what the qualified medical evaluators do in California. They look at the medical records, they listen to what you have to say, they look at your job duties, and they make medical decisions as to where your injuries arose from. And if they find that those injuries arose out of employment, in the course of your employment, it's workers' comp.
Let's go with this. Maybe you're a smoker and you have a cough and you're like, oh, it's because I've been smoking. But you also work as a painter and you're not provided masks, and you've been working as a painter for 10 years dealing with these chemicals, and you haven't been provided masks. Now, if you go to the doctor, I would definitely put in a cumulative trauma claim for that, for the internal, for your lungs and all that stuff. If you go to the doctor, they might give you what's called apportionment. That's where they might attribute some of your injury to your smoking and some of it to your work. That's fine. You're still going to get medical treatment. It's still workers' compensation, industrial injury. But you might think it's not because of what you know about yourself. Well, once again, consult with an attorney, because if you work with chemicals, if you work with paints, anything like that, or cleaning supplies, there might be a very strong possibility that you have sustained some type of injury because you've inhaled these chemicals for long enough.
Oh, yeah, there's just a bunch of workers down in Santa Ana that just found out that they were exposed to a whole bunch of chemicals for a bunch of years.
Yeah.
And that was a press release from the Department of Industrial Relations. I don't have the specifics of that. I'll go put that in the description below if you're interested, if our listeners are interested to read about it. But it was a situation where a bunch of workers, unbeknownst to them, had been exposed to these chemicals for all of these years, and they all have workers' comp claims now.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate.
And valid, very valid workers'
very
comp
valid claims.
Yeah.
So, if you're having issues breathing and you've been exposed to chemicals, or you think you might be exposed to chemicals, that's a situation you do have a workers' comp claim. It's almost like a cumulative trauma claim, where exposure over time to something at work caused you injuries. It's legitimate, and it's something that you need to follow up on. Don't just let it go, because you need those benefits for your livelihood, and that's why they're there. And don't just think, oh, it's just something that just happened. No, it's a legitimate injury, and it's maybe not as common as a sprain or strain, but when it happens, and it's a legitimate complaint that you could have.
Yeah. So we could talk about injuries all day. We've seen them all. Well, we haven't seen them all. We've seen a lot, and I'm sure there's a lot. Yeah, thousands, and I'm sure there's thousands more we haven't seen, right? But I'm going to point out a couple. Alex, if one of them clicks something in your head, just speak about it. But I'm just going to click a couple and how they can occur. Once again, we do these videos for your information and for the information they can provide to your friends and family. This is great information for anyone that's an employee, which is pretty much everyone, right? So what other injuries can occur? Let me tell you that hearing loss can occur. How can that occur? Maybe you work at a construction site, loud noises every day. Maybe you work at a concert venue, really loud venue, and you constantly hear very loud noises. Hearing loss can occur. That's something very real. That's something that it could be a workers' compensation claim. Once again, loss of vision. Depending. A lot of times, we all work with computers. We look at our phones every day, but, there might be some people that more than others, they're just subjected to something that's very bright every day. Or maybe they work outdoors every day in the sunlight, and now it's affecting their vision. Anything that you can imagine might affect your vision. If it's work related, it's a workers' compensation claim. We talked briefly in other videos about amputations. Of course, that can happen in certain types of industries. It's likely to happen in those industries more than others. But amputations, dental injuries. I've actually had a lot of clients with dental injuries. That can happen in a number of ways. That can happen in a bar fight where you weren't even involved in the altercation, but you worked at the bar or you worked at the venue and security was, getting into it with certain people and you got hit in the face and now you knocked out a couple teeth. Dental injuries. That's just one way. Or you could have gotten electrocuted and, that caused you to clench your jaw. Or you could have a lot of stress because of your injury and now you're grinding your teeth. I mean, trust me, we've seen a lot of things. So if you're having an issue with certain body part, let us know. Put it in the comments. Put it in the questions in our video. If you don't want it to be out there because it's personal, call our injury helpline. Organ damage, we talked about chemicals, all that kind of stuff. But something that's not discussed, Alex, and a lot of people aren't aware about is organ damage and internal injuries due to the medications you're taking because of the injury you sustained at work.
A secondary
and
injury. It's fully legit.
100%. So,
and the adjuster's not going to be just extending out their hand to help you with your internal issues.
Right.
If you're having those issues, you complain to the doctor at the medical clinic, and the medical clinic just brushes you off, and you talk to the adjuster, and the adjuster just hangs up on you, says, I'm not going to help you with that. You need a lawyer for these issues. And remember, this is general information only. It's meant to give you a better understanding of what types of claims qualify for workers' compensation. That's the point of this episode, but it's not legal advice. If you need legal advice, dial the injury helpline. That number is 844-984-8414. Send us a message. We're going to put a link down below. You can send us a message as well, and you can ask for that free case consultation where we're going to listen to the specific facts and circumstances of your case and give you that legal advice that you need to present your claim to give you the best shot at getting benefits under any of these types of scenarios.
Yeah. And the reason we put these videos out, I'm going to say this, and I hope you understand it, is that the insurance adjuster, the insurance company, and the employer are counting on you not knowing your rights, and they're hoping that you don't consult with us. So consult with us today and make sure you get everything you deserve.